Om Sthapakaya cha dharmasya sarvadharmasvarupine avatara varisthaya Ramakrishnaya te namaha. Vasudeva sutang devam Kangsachanuramardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnang Vande Jagatgurum. So in the last class, we ended our discussion in the 22nd sloka of the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita. So what it speaks of? Vasangsi jirnani yatha vihaya navani grinhati naroparani tatha sharirani vihaya jirnan anyani sangyati navani dehi. That even as a person casts off worn out clothes and puts on others that are new, similarly, the embodied self casts off worn out bodies and enters others that are new. So it's with the help of an example. Here, Bhagavan is illustrating the process of transmigration in which the soul is eternal. It never dies off. It never dies. It is eternal. It is our body, which like clothes gets worn out, and we have to discard them, and enter into the new body or adorn ourselves with a new cloth. And that's how the transmigration goes on. Now, in the process of discussion, we brought into our discussion the idea of the self who is actually not the doer. Somehow it has as if entered into the realm of this body, mind, senses, and it gets identified with the body. And from there, the process of evolution, the biological evolution starts. That is the self seeing its reflection in the body-mind complex, takes the reflection to be real, but at the same time, so when it takes the reflection to be real, what happens? That it is eternal. Bereft of its association with the body-mind complex, it is eternal. But when it gets identified with the body-mind complex and it sees its reflection, it takes the reflection to be the real. We gave the example of an echo. The self is constantly asserting the fact that it is eternal. But now, as it has deluded itself with the image, so as if from the image, the echo is coming. I am eternal. I am eternal. And now the delusion starts. Then the body-mind complex can never be eternal. It has to fall off. And now that echo, which is constantly saying you're eternal, it finds that this idea that it is eternal is not getting materialized through the body-mind complex. It is actually eternal, but it is, because it is identified with the body-mind complex, it's again and again finds that eternity is as if interrupted with the dissolution of the body. And from that, we just were indicating that the entire idea of biological evolution is accepted by Vedanta. that it is the self which gets deluded, that it is the body-mind complex, and tries to realize the eternity in the body-mind complex, is what it is doing. The entire biological evolution, what it speaks of, a single cellular organism, it finds that a little change in stimuli results in its annihilation. The body falls off, and that speaks of annihilation. But something behind is saying you're eternal. So what it does, it tries to fight against the nature, to equip itself more and more so that it can cope up with the nature in a much more better form, evolved form. How the evolution has happened? These single cellular organisms now started conglomerating. First, they formed groups, and then they started conglomerating to be together. They started dividing the labor. That you do the digestion, I do the circulation, you do the respiration. So why all those things? Through that group activity, through that synergy, we both can win. We both can, as a single cellular organism, we had our limitations. We can cope up with those limitations. We can overcome those limitations. And it's a win-win situation. You also win, I also win. And that speaks of synergy. In the modern biology, they say that it is the synergy through which the evolution happened, through cooperation. And that's how the complicated organism grew. What was the motivation behind that growth? That because of delusion, I identified myself with the reflection which is falling in the reservoir called the body-mind senses. I take this Sharira Prana Mana Upahita Chaitanya, the Chaitanya, which is reflecting on the body-mind complex, that to be the real. I'm trying to evolve biologically so that the one who is echoing that you're eternal can be realized there. And it goes on. It cannot be a straight line. This evolution cannot be a straight line progress. A time comes, as a human being, we have developed that uniqueness to realize the spiritual fact that because of the delusion, that I who was actually, I'm never as such attached with the body-mind complex. I'm always apart from it. It's just the reflection with which I got identified and taking it to be the real. That never it happened. I was always separate. Now just that delusion, when it breaks off, I start disidentifying myself with the reflection. And that's this dawn of the spiritual journey. The more I do it, the more I get detached from the body-mind complex, the more I evolve spiritually. And what happens? I end up where I started. It's a cycle. I started as the free soul beyond the realm of the body-mind son, this complex. As a free soul, I started. Somehow that ignorance dawned in. I saw my reflection in the body-mind complex and took it to be real. And this resulted in the entire biological evolution. And now with the idea, when it comes that idea that it is the delusion, that I'm taking the ego to be the real, and I stop getting identified with the reflection, it takes me back again to my pure self, that your true original nature, you get again established in it. That's the cycle of evolution. It starts, of course, with the ignorance. The biological evolution follows, and then the illumination dawns in, resulting in the spiritual evolution to at last render us free. As long as we are identified, this process of living one body, equipping ourselves to have a better body, this goes on. And that's the process which has been spoken of in this sloka. vasangsi jirnani yatha vihaya navani granhati naroparani tatha sharirani vihaya jirnan anyani sangyati navani dehi. Now, in the last class, after the class, when we upload these videos in the YouTube, so I saw some very interesting remarks, some questions. It was really very thought-provoking question. As it is related to this mantra and its discussion, I would, just before proceeding to the next sloka, I would prefer to have a short discussion on that question and try to discuss on the genuine doubt. It's a very nice doubt which has actually came out from that discussion. I will try to just have a short discussion so that we can have a better understanding of the idea of how the process of evolution happens because of the identification of the self with the body-mind complex. So the question is very interesting, that one is not the doer, that we understood. That it is when the self comes in association with the body-mind complex, immediately the body-mind complex, which is inert, as if gets activated. So it is something like what you say, that a very nice term, that automatic response is going on there in the body-mind complex. So now the question is that how can karma theory be applicable to the non-doer, the one who is not doing? How can the karma theory be applicable to the non-doer? So it's a very genuine question. Yes, Atman is the non-doer. It is not doing anything. It is not doing, but it is deluding. Seeing the action going on in nature, it is deluding that it is my action. So what actually liberation entails is not the stopping of action. It is the end of the delusion. To give a very nice example, that how long that delusion lasts, how long that this action of the Prakriti lasts, as long as the delusion is there, as long as you're deluded that you are the body-mind complex. Till then, this game of Maya, the word Maya is very interesting. Maya. Ya means yatha yatha, as it is. Ma is the negation. Maya means what I am seeing is not the real truth. The real truth is being projected the way what I'm seeing. What I'm seeing is the map of reality. It is not the reality. Maya. It is that what I'm seeing is not the truth. So when this delusion arises, as long as the delusion is there, the Maya has its role to play. It will go on dancing and make you dance. The Atman, being deluded, feels that it is something which is limited by the existence of the body-mind complex. It comes to annihilation. Again, it has to take new body. So because of the delusion, this is going on. What has to stop is a delusion, and to really understand that it was not doing anything at any time. Sri Ramakrishna, and when that realization dawns in, the dance of Maya stops. It won't dance anymore. In a very simple way, we can try to understand this phenomenon. Ramakrishna used to say in his colloquial Bengali, very nicely used to say, Maya ke chinte parle, Maya paliye jaye. Once you can recognize the Maya, the ignorance, it flees, it runs away. And he used to, in his own simple way, with the help of stories, allegories, he used to explain the very profound truths of Vedanta. So there's a story, very nice story, that the children were playing. All the children, many children, most of them were cousins, relatives, means in an extended family. joint family. The cousins all stay together. So it's all the siblings and the cousins, they were all playing. And suddenly they saw a bear entered into the room. They all were scared from where this bear came. They were shouting, screaming, they were terrified. And suddenly one of those siblings recognized. She shouted, "Oh, it's our uncle. He has worn the bear skin, and just to play with us came with the bear skin, and we are terrified." But the moment that small girl shouted, "Oh, it's our uncle," immediately the uncle removed the bear skin, because there is now no use of wearing that bear skin. He has been recognized. Now he cannot play prank with the children anymore. So that's a nice story. How long the Maya is going to play with us. We are in no way going to be affected. It's only the bear skin who is wearing. It's something virtual. It's not real. As long as we don't recognize it. The moment I recognize it, it is because of my association. The Prakriti has started dancing, and it is making me feel that I am dancing along with it. The dance goes on. The moment I recognize that it is just Maya, it is not what as it is appearing, immediately it removes it well. And that entails liberation. So these are the various ideas. This in the scripture is profound. To really understand as it is, it's sometimes we find there's a lot of gap in our understanding. So what we have to do is to have to cogitate upon, and with all the various these suggestions, these allegories and upamas, these are the things which help us to understand. These upamas are not to be taken literally. They help us to understand, which is very abstract. I'm taking the help of some of the examples and relating only the similar part of the example with that abstract idea to somehow get an idea of what the scripture is speaking. Nowadays, in the modern days, because of the advent of the computer, some of the scriptural truths becomes more easy to understand by relating with the help of simile. That's the way we use the allegories in the olden days. Here also, computer can be used as an allegory. Just see the chip of the computer. It's like the body-mind complex. It by itself is inert. If the entire civilization is destroyed, suppose after thousands of years, the new human generation that comes, most probably they know nothing of computer. And suddenly by excavation, they discovered these IC chips. They will just look at it and throw, oh, it's most probably a dead log wood. They can never have even an inkling of the idea. What is the idea? That if the bias voltage, the electricity passes through it, it gets enlivened. It will get enlivened. So the moment the electricity passes through it, the thing which was appearing as inert gets enlivened. Now we will take, say, a still more specific example. Suppose in a computer I am watching the movie. What's happening? The IC chip inside the computer, it actually, it's in Vedanta, they say because of the ignorance finds expression in two ways. First, it is Avarana Shakti and then Vikshepa Shakti. The conventional example which they illustrate to explain this Avarana Shakti and Vikshepa Shakti. Avarana means to cover, Vikshepa means that Maya. Now to produce it, to project it as something which it is not. The common example which Vedanta gives, suppose a rope is there lying on the ground in the twilight hours because of insufficient light, I see it as a snake. What has happened? Because of insufficient light, first the avarana, there's a covering, as if there's a covering over the rope. And that covering leads to vikshepa. That's the concept of Maya. It's no more appearing as it is. Now it's seen as a snake. Actually, there's no snake. Now, with the help of computer science, we will try to understand this avaran and vikshepa in a much more specific way. Now, when I am watching the movie, actually what is happening? It is only the bias voltage, without which the computer is just dead. The moment the bias voltage is there, I went to the internet and opened up the channel in which that movie is being played. I'm watching the movie. What is actually happening? Those who know computer, you know that little, even nowadays, we are all to a certain extent computer literate. Though we operate on the computer, we don't know the science of the computer, those who have not studied. But now, even in school, the basic level, the computer science is there where we understand to help us understand the working of the computer. What's the basic way the computer is working? What's going on inside the IC chips? Where when the current passes through it, it immediately projects itself as this world of virtual reality. I'm watching the movie. Actually, this IC chip has many gates. They call it gate. What is gate? In our ordinary language, gate is through which you can pass through, or you may not be allowed to pass through. That's gate. Some desirable persons may be allowed, some may not be allowed. That's the gate. That's the gate meant for. So here also this IC chip has a lot of gates. Now, the current is something which is passing through all these gates. Now, first there is avarana. Through some of the gates, it is allowed to pass through. Some of the gates, it is not allowed to pass through. As a result, what happens? There is only two things to represent this, the current which has passed through these gates. That is 1 and 0. When the gates through which the current is passing through is represented as 1, something positive, and through which it has been obscured is 0. 1 and 0. The entire computer science actually is based on this binary number, 1 and 0. So what the one when passes through these IC chips becomes a permutation combination of 1 and 0. This 1 and 0 is creating the picture, the virtual reality. I'm seeing so many characters, there's so many events, everything is going on, but it is that symbol bias voltage, which while flowing, passing through the IC chips, creating this imaginary world, and then again passing out as the bias voltage, the same current. Actually, no change has happened to the current. In the process, when I'm watching the movie, for some time, in the process, it is passing through the IC chip as it has been obscured, not totally obscured, it has been obscured in such a way. Now it creates a panorama. But it is always the same bias voltage. Again, it is passing out as the same bias voltage. In between, we create this world of virtual reality. And that's what the basic idea of Purusha and Prakriti in Sankhya philosophy is. In no way the Purusha is undergoing any change. It is when passing through the Prakriti, the myriads of this phenomenal existence evolves because of avarana and vikshepa. When Sri Ramakrishna was in Dakshineshwar, there was apparently a madcap was in Dakshineshwar for a short time. Everyone thought him to be mad. He always used to have a wonderful smile and move around, and he used to have a chandelier in his hand. He will play with the chandelier, allow the sunlight to fall on the chandelier, and that creates a myriad of light and shade, a wonderful. And he will just see that how the light and shade is playing around while the sunlight is falling through it, and it is playing around on the ground, that reflection falls, and it's the wonderful, that image of light and shade is playing around, and he will just laugh seeing it and say, "Oh Lord, what a wonderful Maya you have created." this white light falling through the chandelier, creating this myriads of this light and shade, the game of light and shade. So it is actually not there. The sun is in no way affected. As long as I'm playing with the chandelier, it appears to be that world of virtual reality finds its expression. If I am aware of the fact, if I get identified with it, just in the movie, if we are getting identified with it, we may get scared, we may feel the tragedy. But if I know it is virtual, it is not going to affect me. Sometimes because of the entertainment purpose, what we do, we allow ourselves to be identified with it. Knowing very well, we can never get identified with it in reality. A time the movie will stop, I will be myself, old self, and then I will say, it was a movie. It was just for my entertainment. And that's why to watch a tragedy movie, we pay and go to the cinema hall. Because we know very well that it is going to end and it is in no way is going to affect the real me. As long as it is something virtual, I can, even it may be a tragedy, even it may be a utter violence, crime, I enjoy because it's not real. So here also that the idea which is that we are never the doer. The real Atman is never the doer. But when it is getting identified the virtual world, it starts seeing that virtual world, it feels that it is a part of it. Just the way when we are watching the movie, seeing the main character of the movie to be going through a lot of turmoils and tragedies, I identify myself with the character and I start crying. I in no way am actually identified with it. Nothing has happened to me. So here also, that just the way the one who is watching the movie is the non-doer. But why he's crying? Because for the time being, he has got identified with that character and starts feeling that all the changes in life is happening to him. So the moment the delusion falls off, nothing is going to affect me. Even when I am under delusion, there is no real change in me. Previously, when I was not watching the movie, there was what I was when I'm watching, then also I'm the same person. When the movie will be over, then also I'm the same person. Nothing has happened to me. I was in no way involved in it, but it was only that wrong identification that created the suffering. So that's the idea of the non-doer, that to get rid of that false identification. I was never doing. It was only that my identification that started creating that the game, the play of the Maya. In Yoga Sutra, in Sankhya philosophy, they give some very nice example. You know that the Purusha and Prakriti. The Prakriti is like a dancing girl. It's an example they give. Yes, for the sake of example, to clarify our doubts, let us resort to that example. That Prakriti is like a dancing girl. Now what it does, it finds that a Purusha, just who is watching, is mesmerized by the dance, by all the dance and the acting which he's doing, is mesmerized. Seeing him mesmerized, he goes on that dancing and acting, whatever way she can mesmerize that person. After some time, she finds that this person is now no more deluded. She has now being satiated by what was going on. Now he wants to be his old self. So now she knows that all this, acting, my dancing is of no avail. He's no more interested. Now she will try to delude someone else with the dancing. So that's how that there are so many Purushas. It is only those who are mesmerized, for them that dancing goes on. For the one who have got satiated with it, have understood its real nature, that it is just meant to lure me, and comes out of it the nature finds that there is no purpose in trying to lure him. I cannot lure him. So that's why that idea is very interesting, that once you recognize the Maya falls off. As long as I have not recognized, this process goes on. Life after life, with there's myriads of the plays and games in the form of various bodies is going on. And that's the idea which has been spoken of as Vasangsi Chirnani. It is all, as long as I'm identified with the psychophysical existence, it goes on. Now again, there are many doubts. I've seen that the biology says it is only in the mother's womb. It is only because of the physical union, something, life is coming out from where the soul comes. How it does, is it something spooky that in the mother's womb the soul enters? So many questions naturally may arise. But even in the modern science, there is a branch of science which has developed from genetics. It is becoming stronger. It is called epigenetics. I don't know whether you are aware of one of the books which is actually one of the best sellers. It's called The Biology of Belief. Its author is Bruce H. Lipton. He is a PhD in medical science, and it's in the mainstream medical science. He's a doctor, he's a postgraduate, not only postgraduate, he's actually a professor in the university teaching the medical students. He's the one who is thought to be the one who is the founder of this branch of this called this epigenetics. What's the idea there? Previously, the biology had the idea that it is the genes which decides what we are. All the bends in our character, mind, the trends, the inclinations, our orientations, everything the genes decide. Now, this epigenetics with science, I won't go to the details of it, have made it almost an established truth that it is the environment, it is the way I think affects the genes. Genes is not something which is the ultimate, the fundamental thing which decides how we should be, how we are going to be, what's our character going to be, what's our behavioral traits going to be. The environment affects the genes. So based on that, the biology of belief, that's a wonderful book. I'm not going to it, just to relate to this sloka, this Vasangsi Jirnani. I will just go to the epilogue of the book. I will read out a portion where you will find it's the epilogue is actually the conclusion after going through the entire discussion to prove that how we are being affected by our environment, by our thoughts processes, and it starts changing the genes. Then at last in the epilogue, it is going to some very interesting discussion where the idea of the non-locality of the self is being brought forward. That is something called self has to be there. And it is non-local. Just the way when you are watching the TV, has really something entered into your TV? A small child may think so, that something must be inside the TV. All those characters must be inside the TV. Has it anything entered in it? Just the way we think in the mother's womb, when the child is growing, something must have entered. And if we even open up the TV, we find nothing. If we just dissect the body, we find nothing. We say, oh, it's all nonsense. The idea of self, it is just the conglomeration of the biological cells with which it has evolved. That we will think. But we forget. When the TV is going on, nothing has entered into it as a physical being. But what we see is actually being transmitted. That transmission is non-local. That is the thing which is not seen. That is the thing which you cannot burn. That is the thing which you cannot cut with sword. Now you will find what Gita is going to say in the succeeding sloka is very interesting. Before going to the succeeding slokas, I will read out that portion from the biology of belief as in the epilogue to find that wonderful idea by which the process of transmigration with the help of biology is being explained. It's a wonderful this science. It is actually the science which is more and more relating to these ideas of the reincarnation. I will just, without further introduction, let me go. I will just read out that portion of the epilogue of the book, The Biology of Belief. Consider the human body as a television set. You are the image on the screen, but your image did not come from inside the television. Your identity is an environmental broadcast that was received via an antenna. One day, you turn on the TV and the picture tube has blown out. Your first reaction would be, oh, the television is dead. But did the image die along with the television set? To answer that question, you get another television set, plug it in, turn it on, and tune it to the station you were watching before the picture tube blew out. This exercise will demonstrate that the broadcast image is still on the air, even though your first television died. The death of the television as the receiver in no way killed the identity broadcast that comes from the environment. In this analogy, the physical television is the equivalent of the living cell. The TV's antenna, which downloads the broadcast, represents our full set of identifying receptors, and the broadcast represents an environmental signal. Because of our preoccupation with the material Newtonian world, we might at first assume that the cell's protein receptors are the self. That would be the equivalent of believing that the TV's antenna is the source of the broadcast. Just a small child, if it tries to find out from where the picture is coming, it sees the line, the wire, the cable at last ending in antenna and may think it's from the antenna. The cell's receptors are not the source of its identity, but the vehicle by which the self is downloaded from the environment. You will find that even in the modern science, they have started realizing the self comes much later. Even the mind, the brain is not the mind. The real mind is non-local. Just the way you on the in computer, you are trying to download something from the internet. All those informations are non-local. It gets localized as per your choice. As a medical student, I want to download some medical journals. So as per my choice, I'm creating my own world. Mind is non-local. It has all the information. I, as per my choice, as per my temperament, create my own world by what I download. So just to see the wonderful idea. So it is that as we were reading, that I realize that my identity, myself, exists in the environment, whether my body is here or not. I am there as that non-local. Identity is always there. Just as in the TV analogy, if my body dies and in the future a new individual, biological television set, is born who has the same exact set of identity receptors, that our sanskaras decide that to having that what we do, that even you will study the science of reincarnation, they say that my sanskaras decide in which body I will be born, where I find that the body in which those receptors are tuned to my sanskaras. Just the way the channel which is being broadcasted is always there. The one who is tuning a particular channel, only that particular channel is being received. Similarly here, that you as a non-local, that's the mind, this is there with all your this what you say sanskaras, you're there. When you get a body which is tuned to the sanskaras, which needs to be expressed, you are actually getting as if downloaded through that body. It's not something physical entering. So that's the idea, which is being how nicely illustrated in a science book. The book, as we told, is it's the actually considered as the Bible of epigenetics, the biology of belief. It is becoming stronger, though there is a lot of opposition in the world of science, but it is becoming, because of its evidence-based facts, it is becoming stronger and stronger. Not only that, it speaks that here, with the help of this TV analogy, we can never understand the theory of karma, that how our karma leads to different types of body. As per my karma, I can get a better body, or it may lead to some lower birth. That also has been explained with another allegory. I will read out, because these allegories helps clarifies our doubt. Swami Vivekananda used to say that we welcome the development of science. When he was in the West, he found that with the discovery of the science, the pillars of religion were as if falling. The foundation of religion was falling. And then he asserted that I, coming from the Vedanta background, actually encourage all the discoveries of science. What he told was something very interesting. With the discoveries of science, the Vedanta will shine forth. Its pillars will get stronger. And if any misunderstanding, if some superstitious beliefs are there, they will get cleared off. But it's real, the essence of the Vedanta will shine forth. Its foundation will be based on a stronger foundation. The science will be the foundation. Now, just see another nice example, which the author, this Bruce Lipton, is giving. That here I understand myself is a projection. But how the law of karma works, that he's actually using not the TV analogy, he's using the analogy of land rovers in Mars. I will read it before discussing. That you will find that that the discussion itself, that the words of Bruce Lipton itself is self-explanatory. Let me read it, and then we can just comment on what he's saying. While the TV analogy is useful, it is not a complete one, because the television is only a playback device. In the course of our lives, what we do alters the environment. We change the environment simply by being here. So a more complete way of understanding our relationship to spirit is to compare a human to the Martian rovers. Spirit and opportunity, those are the names of the rovers. Or the other NASA landers we have sent to the moon and Mars. Humans are not yet able to go physically to Mars, but we really want to know what it would be like to land on Mars. So we send up the equivalent of a human explorer. Although the Mars rovers don't physically resemble a human, they have functions of humans. These vehicles have cameras, which are the eyes that see the planet. They have vibration detectors, which are ears that hear the planet. They have chemical sensors, which test the planet, etc. So the lander is designed with sensors that can experience Mars somewhat as a human would experience it. But let's look a little more closely at how the Mars rovers work. The rovers have antennas that are tuned to receive information broadcasts by a human being in the form of a NASA controller. Just see, again, it's question of transmission. Someone sitting in the control room of the NASA. From here, he's actually remote controlling all these rovers. So what he's doing this, the earthbound controller actually sends information that animates the mariner on Mars. But the information is not a one-way street. The NASA controller who learns from the lander, because the vehicle transmits information about its Mars experiences back to Earth. So in the TV analogy, it was one way. But the rovers, what we are doing, we are sending the transmission. They are also sending us the feedback by which we know what's going on in the Mars. Now, a very interesting thing, this theory of karma will come into picture by the next discussion. You and I are like Earth landers who receive information from an environmental controller. As we, or the spirit, the environmental controller is the spirit. As we live our lives, the experiences of our world are sent back to that controller, our spirit. So the character of how you live your life influences the character of yourself. This interaction corresponds to the concept of karma. Now, just to illustrate what he's saying is very interesting. Now, the Land Rover, which is now roaming around in the Mars, what I am sending some signal, the controller is sending some signal, it is sending back me the feedback. But if the rover goes wrong, then all the signals it is sending back will be a distortion. Based on that distortion, when I distorted information, I sent in the feedback, that again, that feedback itself won't allow it to work in the proper way. It will get more and more distorted. So that's how at last we stopped working with them. So this interaction corresponds with the concept of this karma. When we understand it, we must make heed of the life we live on this planet, because the consequences of our life last longer than our bodies. What we do during our lifetime can come back to haunt us or a future version of ourselves. This interaction speaks of a very wonderful thing, that there is something called that Hiranyagarbha, the cosmic mind, with which we are interacting. We are sending the signals. The cosmic mind has its own laws. We can never break them. If somehow we get wrong, the Land Rover gets wrong, it starts sending false signals. That false signal will deviate him more and more, because based on the false signals, the signals which will be sent again, instead of bringing it back to the mainstream, will deviate it more and more. So what we send back decides that what we are going to have as destiny in future. So these all examples, as we are told, these are all examples. But this helps us to understand much far better the theory of reincarnation. That's why we are bringing this discussion into this picture in the next sloka. Let's just read the sloka. When they say that Nainang chindanti shastrani, Nainang dahati pavaka, Na chainang kledayantyap, Na shoshayati maruta. Weapons cannot cut it, fire cannot burn it, water cannot wet it, the wind cannot ride. Anything which has no parts, which is not made up of material components. Just the way we think that when the child is in the mother's womb, it is the material components which are getting conglomerated to create the self as an epiphenomenon out of it. We will be deluded. It is the transmission that our self, which is in the environment as a non-local existence, it's being as if downloaded by the physical existence. Just the TV, that of course speaks of the physical existence, but it doesn't work by itself. When the picture tube blew off, I bought a new TV. Yes, that's what happens when the child is growing in the mother's womb, that a new TV is being born. But it is dead unless the transmission is there. And that's the non-local transmission, which no one can touch. That non-local transmission, Nainam chindanti shastrani, can, with weapons, you can, even you just forget about the self. You take this example in this allegory, the transmission. in the TV. You can destroy the TV, but can you stop the transmission? Nainang chindanti shastrani, nainang dahati pavaka. Something non-local. The wind cannot dry it. Nachainang kledayanti apa. The water cannot wet it. Na shoshayati maruta. The fire cannot burn it. Water cannot wet it. The wind cannot. Na shoshayati maruta. The wind cannot dry it. So now you can understand that something which is non-local is beyond all this material way of destruction. I cannot do that. Something which has no parts. The self is without that. And for this reason, in the 24th sloka, is a reiteration of the same idea which has been spoken of in the 23rd sloka. Achcheddoyam, adayoyam, akledya, ashoshya evacha, nitya, sarvagata, sthanu, achaloyam, sanatana. The self cannot be cut. Achcheddoyam, you cannot cut it. Adayoyam, you cannot burn it. Akledya, you cannot drench it. You cannot moisturize it. Kledya. Ashoshya, you cannot dry it. It's almost a reiteration of what has been spoken of in the same sloka. Eternal, all-pervading, nitya, sarvagata. The idea of non-locality, non-pervading. Sthanuhu, unchanging. When we speak of unchanging, we think something must be as hard as a rock. We forget the transmission, which has no as such material substance, can never be changed. So it is that the gap in our understanding which doesn't allow us to understand these slokas in the proper perspective. If you take the sthanu as something solid material, again we will be doing the mistake. It is unmovable, just the way the image which is being transmitted, nothing can move it. The moment you buy the new TV, it is again there. Is it something solid? No. So something can be unmovable just by being non-local. It's unchanging. Nitya, sarvagata, sthanu, achaloyam. You cannot move it. You cannot change it. The self is same forever. So that's the idea. The scripture. In the scripture, they say the shastreshu na mantranam jamita asti. That repetition is not a fault in scripture. The same ideas will be repeated. Because we find that what is required is sravana, manana, nididhyasana. We have to have shraddha. That when I find that in the scripture is confusing me, instead of brushing the scripture off and saying it's all nonsense, why not have the humility to acknowledge the fact that most probably there is some lack in my understanding. I am not all-knowing. I have limitations in my understanding. Let me have shraddha, let me have respect in the words of the scripture and try to do manana, and let me cogitate upon it. And as I cogitate with shraddha, gradually the doubts gets clear and I get intellectually convinced. That's the beginning of the real spiritual journey. That intellectual conviction is not all. That has to be internalized so that your life, your stimuli response conditioning changes. You behave as per your intellectual conviction. In science and religion, that's the difference. In science, I know so many things, but it has nothing to do with my day-to-day life. Even if I know that there is some self which has non-local, nothing can kill it, it can be just an academic knowledge. I can just lead my old way of living. Spirituality speaks of that knowledge which I have understood intellectually and I'm convinced about it. How to transform it as the be-all and end-all of my existence. If that's the truth, that should find expression through my life. And for that, first, that clarification is very much important. I have to go through it. Even in our ordinary science, that's what we do. When someone says the scientist, such and such renowned scientist has formulated this, immediately we believe it. We have the sufficient humility to acknowledge the fact that my understanding is not up to it. Let me go on studying it, contemplating on it, cogitating upon it. The doubts will get cleared. The scientist can never be. What he told can never be false. It has to be true. I have that belief. And then gradually my intellectuality goes to that, evolves to that state so as to relate to the truth which has been spoken of. So in the scripture, the same thing has to be done. And for that, the repetition is not a fault. It actually helps us to cogitate upon the same truth through various suggestions. And that's why we find even in the Gita, since there are so many repetitions, the same sloka as if being repeated just in a bit different language. So the 25th sloka, we will end our discussion today. What it says, almost the same idea. Avyaktoyam achintyoyam avikaryoyam uchyate tasmat evam viditvainam nanu shochitumarhasi. The self is said to be unmanifest. It is the transmission which results in the image. But can you, without the TV, can you ever be aware of the transmission? No. It is inaccessible to the senses. I cannot see, the senses can never see the transmission. Avyaktoyam, avyakta means which is unmanifest. Achintya, it is incomprehensible. It's only when finding as an image as it in the TV, then only you can comprehend. Otherwise, it is incomprehensible, inaccessible to the mind. Avyakta speaks inaccessible to the senses. Achintya speaks, it is inaccessible to the mind. I can never think, I can never conceptualize the self. It can never be done. Very nicely in Ashtavakra Gita, there is a very nice phrase in one of the slokas. Achintyam chintyamanopi chintarupam bhajatyasau. That when you think of the unthinkable, the thing which you cannot think, if you try to think of it, you are just resorting to a piece of thought only. To give an example, when I say aham brahmasmi, who is saying? The mind is saying that what Brahma is never can be thought of. When I say aham brahmasmi, it is the mind, the Brahma which is beyond the mind. I can never conceptualize it with the mind. When I say I am Brahman, I'm not the body, not the mind, not the senses. Who is doing it? It is the mind who is doing it. Then is there no use of it? No. That's a different part of the discussion. It is this process by which I can go beyond the mind. That's why it is okay. But know it for certain, when I say aham brahmasmi, actually I'm in no way relating to Brahman. But then why should I do it? It will help me to go beyond the mind and take me there to that realization. The greatest delusion which happens in the spiritual life is, again and again, we take the way to be the goal. It is all way. When I say aham brahmasmi, it is just a way to really relate to my real identity. It's not speaking of the ultimate reality. I can never speak of the tattva. It is just a index pointer. Most of the time, the mistake which we do in spiritual life is when a small child, the mother is trying to show the moon to the child. And at last she points the finger to the moon. The child is so attached to the mother. It is always looking at the mother. When the mother is pointing the finger at the moon, the mother finds the child is looking at the finger. Mother is saying, see the moon? The child, she in no way could divert the direction of the child. That finger is the pointer. You have to just divert your attention from the finger and you have to look at the object to which it is pointing. But the child goes on looking at the finger. That's what we do. When I say aham brahmasmi, I think I've understood everything. We have taken the pointer to be the real and go on saying aham brahmasmi. But actually, this is just the pointer. With this, we have really to take a quantum jump to go beyond the mind. There's a process. This is a process actually. By constantly cogitating mentally, aham brahmasmi can take you beyond the mind. We are not bringing it immediately into the discussion. There's a science again behind it. So what it is saying is something interesting, is achintya. You can never comprehend. It is inaccessible to the mind. Avikarya, unchangeable. So you will find, it's again, Just it becomes so easy to understand with the help of the transmission. Transmission is not the self. We are taking it as an allegory with its limitations. That's the things which are similar to the concept of the self. Only those things we are taking to understand. So we should never take the TV transmission to be the self. Just we are taking the similarity to understand that what it is speaking of. Just the way the transmission becomes accessible to the senses only when in the TV it has taken the form of the image. As transmission, it is avyakta, it is unmanifest. Till it has found the image, you cannot even think of it. Achintya, avikarya. Nothing can change because as we have seen, no weapons can cut it. Wind cannot dry it. Fire cannot burn it. Water cannot drench it. So it is avikarya, unchangeable, without birth. So that's the self which is transmitting from body to body. Nothing can annihilate. So why are you thinking that all, Arjuna, that your relatives and everyone is going to be killed in this battle? They're just going to change the forms. But in the process, righteousness will win. That will be established. For that the war is. It in no way is going to kill anyone. People will be changing their roles. And in the process, the dharma will be established. So don't grieve for the role which you are supposed to play as a kshatriya, as a righteous warrior, and that too under the guidance of the divine. Become an instrument, a nimitta, and take part in this battle. Do not like a coward run away from it. So that's the idea. We'll find that how this sublime ideas Bhagavan is bringing in the midst of the battle. That's a very important thing. Spirituality doesn't speak of exclusiveness in our day-to-day life. In the midst of all the madness, the tranquility can be experienced if we know the science behind it. Yoga, karma, sukhaushalam. And then you learn the trick, kaushala, to act in this life in a detached manner, where everything goes on, but nothing can perturb you. So you need not have to be exclusively leaving everything, go to the forest or to some corner of your house to separate yourself from all the activities to dive deep into the contemplation. Everything can go on. You take care of responsibilities. You are in the midst of this madness of the world, but still you can enjoy the bliss of tranquility. And that's what Bhagavan is equipping Arjuna with. It's all the suggestions. That's the more important than the hard skills. And in our present day say that the certificate speaks of the hard skills, but all our motivation speaks of the soft skills. And in any workplace, now they go on saying that all our education, which we have bought with money, so much of money we have spent for it, it at last contributes only 20% of your professional excellence. 80% comes from the soft skills. Your attitude, your behavior, the way you cope up with the situation, your resilience, your grit. And for this, that 80%, we have no knowledge. There is no academic knowledge for that. Now in the form of positive psychology, it is coming into the academics. And we find in all the universities, the most popular professors are the professors of the positive psychology, because they are also trying to bring in this aspect, this soft skills, into the field of academics. That contributes the 80%. Arjuna was confident with that 20%. He was a warrior. He was confident that with this I can rule the world. In the battlefield, he found how miserable he is, that 80% soft skills is lacking. And there lies the role of Krishna, to equip him with those soft skills. That's the 80%. That alone can help us to run as an effective being, a productive being in this world. Otherwise, with all our hard skills, with all the skills which we have gathered, which has been produced in our certificate, is of no use. That's just simply get shattered. So that's how the Gita will proceed gradually to the various slokas to equip us. He's addressing Arjuna through Arjuna, he's addressing, God is addressing the entire humankind to equip us in this battlefield of the life. It is not a pleasure ground. It's a gymnasium where we have came to make ourselves strong. That's what Swami Vivekananda used to say. So how we can make ourselves strong, that's the context of Bhagavad Gita. So we will continue with the slokas, considering slokas again in the next class. With this, we stop our discussion today. Thank you all. Namaskar.